My name is Mabel Ruth Carter, and I'm 74 years old. This house I'm sitting in has been my whole life. Every corner of it still smells like my late husband's cologne. Every creak in the floor still carries our laughter. I planted those roses outside with my own hands the summer we moved in, 42 years ago. I never imagined the roots of those flowers would outlive the promises my own son made to me. Before I begin, my dears, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Whispers of Mama Ruth. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It warms my heart to know who's listening to these old hands tell their stories. That morning started like any other. I was in the kitchen making cornbread for Sunday service when a white envelope slipped through the mail slot. I almost didn't notice it at first. Just another bill, I thought. But the name printed on it wasn't mine anymore. It was his, my son's, the boy I carried under my heart for 9 months, whose fever I cooled with my own breath, whose future I built with calloused hands and sleepless nights. The paper trembled in my fingers. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the words that tore through me like glass. Transfer of ownership. The house my husband and I built, the only home I had ever known, was gone, sold, without my knowledge, without my blessing, without a single word from him. I remember the way the world went quiet, the hum of the refrigerator fading, the clock ticking too loudly. I felt as if the walls were closing in, whispering back all the prayers I had once said between these same 4 corners. I looked at the chair where my husband used to sit and talk about the future, how we'd grow old here, how this home would be our legacy. Maybe, I thought, the dead can feel shame, because in that moment I felt his presence sink into the silence. I called my son 3 times. The first went to voicemail. The second was declined. The third, he answered, his voice hurried, detached. "Mom, don't be dramatic," he said. "It's just property. Just property." I pressed my hand against the table, steadying the tremor in my chest. Property was what kept us fed when his father lost work. Property was what we prayed for when the storm ripped the roof in '83. Property was the word I whispered to the Lord when I thanked him for giving us shelter. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "Son, you've sold your mother's heart." He sighed, told me he'd call back, and hung up. That evening I walked through each room as if I were visiting a stranger's house. My photographs, mine, were still on the walls, but they suddenly looked like they belonged to someone else's life. The wallpaper we'd chosen on our anniversary now peeled like old skin, and I ran my fingertips over the faded pattern, feeling the dust of years crumble under my touch. Outside, the wind picked up. The roses bent under it, but they didn't break. I thought about that, how roots hold even when the storm doesn't ask permission to come. As night fell, I brewed a cup of tea and sat in the living room that no longer belonged to me. Every sound seemed louder. The clock, the wind, my heartbeat. I prayed quietly, "Lord, if this is your way of testing me, give me strength to understand." That was when I noticed the keys, my husband's old keyring lying on the mantel, the one I hadn't touched since the day he died. I don't know why, but I picked it up, and in that very second, a memory struck me, something he once said years ago while fixing that same lock. "Never give away what you built with love, Mabel. If you do, it'll find its way back, one way or another." I held those keys tight that night, until sleep came, and the house around me felt like it was breathing again, quiet, waiting, alive. But deep down, I knew something had changed forever. That was the last night I slept under a roof that was truly mine, and I had no idea. The real story hadn't even begun yet. You know, when I was younger, I used to think a house was just walls and a roof, a place to sleep, to cook, to rest. But this house had a soul. It carried our laughter in its bricks, our tears in the floorboards. Every nail, every squeak, every corner knew my story better than anyone still breathing. I remember the day we moved in. My husband, Samuel, was still strong then, his hands rough from years working the railroads. He lifted me through the doorway like we were newlyweds, even though we were already 2 decades into our marriage. We didn't have much, but he looked around that tiny living room and said, "Mabel, this isn't a house, it's a promise." We built that promise day by day. The porch where we'd sip coffee before church, the kitchen where I burned my first loaf of cornbread, and he laughed till tears rolled down his face. We couldn't afford fancy furniture, so Samuel carved our table himself. Every scratch on it has a story. The night our son took his first steps and slammed his spoon against the wood. The morning I told Samuel I was pregnant again. And we both just sat there, stunned and smiling. When Samuel passed, I couldn't bring myself to change a thing. His coat still hung by the door for years. His slippers stayed beside the bed like he'd just stepped out for a moment. The house became quieter, yes, but it never felt empty. It felt alive, like it was still holding him for me. Sometimes at night, when the world outside went still, I could swear I heard his steps in the hallway. Not in a frightening way, no. It was gentle, like he was checking that I'd locked the back door, the way he always did. And when I'd whisper, "Good night, Sam," the wind would sigh through the window, just soft enough to sound like, "Good night, Mabel." That's why when I saw my son's name on that paper, it didn't just mean losing Walls. It meant losing the last piece of Samuel I had left. It meant erasing 42 years of a life that didn't begin in luxury, but ended in love. I spent that evening sitting on the front porch, watching the sky turn the same orange it always did before rain. The roses I planted had started to wilt. I bent down and touched one. Its petals were brittle, its color fading. "I guess you're tired too," I whispered. And maybe I was talking to the house or to Samuel, or maybe to the part of myself that still believed in promises. I remembered a summer storm. Long ago, the roof had caved in over the kitchen, rain pouring through the ceiling. I was crying, scared, certain we'd lose everything. But Samuel wrapped his arms around me and said, "Don't cry. Mabel, storms don't destroy what's rooted deep." Then he lifted a bucket, smiled and added, "They just show you what needs mending." Those words echoed in my chest that night. Maybe this was just another storm, one I didn't understand yet. I looked around that porch, the chipped paint, the loose railing, the swing that creaked whenever the wind blew, and I thought about all the years that had passed. I realized something strange. I'd been so busy surviving that I never noticed how much this home had protected me. Through widowhood, through loneliness, through every silent Sunday after the children stopped coming by. Maybe that's why, even after the betrayal, I couldn't hate my son. Anger felt too heavy for an old heart like mine. I just felt hollow, like a part of the house had been sold too, and I didn't know how to buy it back. That night, I walked back inside and stood in the living room. The air felt thick, like the house was holding its breath. I ran my fingers along the wall where Samuel had written a verse from the Bible years ago. Before repainting it, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty." For some reason, I pressed my palm to that wall and whispered, "If there's still shelter here, Lord, let me find it again." And right then, I can't explain it, the old clock on the mantel, silent for years, began to tick again, slow and steady, as if the house itself was answering me. I stood there frozen, my eyes wet. Maybe the house wasn't mine on paper anymore, but it still knew my name. It didn't happen all at once. That's the cruel thing about distance. It creeps in quiet, like dust settling over furniture you forgot to care for. One week, my son was too busy to stop by after work. Then a month passed, then 2. Before I realized it, the only sound that filled this house was my own kettle whistling in an empty kitchen. He used to come by every Sunday. We'd sit on the porch, drink coffee, and talk about everything and nothing. He'd bring me those cinnamon rolls from the bakery on Elm Street, the ones with too much frosting, and I'd pretend not to notice he always ate the biggest one first. He'd ask about the roses, the neighbors, the weather, like a man with nowhere else to be. I lived for those afternoons. Then came the changes. Small at first, the phone calls grew shorter, his voice colder. He started saying, "Mom, I'll call you tomorrow." And tomorrow turned into silence. I told myself he was just tired, stressed, busy with his wife, his job, his life. That's what good mothers do. We excuse the absences, even when they start to sound like goodbyes. But I knew something had shifted. I could feel it in the way he avoided my eyes the last time he came over. His wife, my daughter-in-law, sat on my couch like she owned the place, her perfume filling the room like an unwanted guest. I remember her smile, polite, thin, the kind of smile that hides sharp edges. When she spoke, her words were dipped in honey but stung like vinegar. "It's such a cute little house, Mama Ruth," she said. "So vintage." That word stayed in my chest like a splinter. Not beautiful, not homey, but vintage. Like something outdated, something past its use. My son just sat there, fiddling with his phone, not saying much at all. When I served them tea, he didn't even touch the cup. I asked if something was wrong. He said, "No, Mom. Everything's fine." But he couldn't look at me. He never could when he was lying. After they left that day, I found the cup still full, the tea gone cold, untouched. The same way my heart felt. Weeks later, I got a message from him. "Mom, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time you considered moving somewhere smaller. You know, something easier for you to handle." I stared at that text for a long time. Smaller, easier. What he meant was somewhere farther away, somewhere invisible. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked into Samuel's old workshop. Dust covered everything. His tools, his hat, the little wooden box he used to keep important things in. I ran my hand along the shelf and whispered, "Can you believe this, Sam? The boy you taught to build is now tearing down what we made." That night, I sat by the window waiting to see his car lights in the driveway, like I used to when he was a teenager. But no lights came, only the glow of the street lamp outside, flickering as if the world itself was hesitating to look in. Sometimes, when the loneliness became too much, I'd still set 2 cups on the table, one for me, one for him, just in case. And one night, I'll never forget this, the phone rang past midnight. My heart jumped, thinking it was him. But it was a wrong number, a woman's voice asking for someone named Clara. I almost thanked her, just for letting me hear another human voice. I started noticing other small things after that. Mail addressed to him, calls from unknown numbers. Once a man came to the door asking for Mr. Carter. I told him my husband had been gone for years. He looked confused and said, "Oh, I meant your son. He told me he'd be living here soon." Living here soon. That's when the first chill ran through me. Not from the weather, but from knowing something had been decided without me. I began to wonder if my home, my soul, was being sold piece by piece, and I just hadn't been invited to the auction. One Sunday, I set out his old favorite mug and waited again. The clock ticked through the morning, the afternoon, and into the evening. The tea went cold. The porch light buzzed, and somewhere in the distance, I swore I heard my husband's voice, low and steady, whispering what he always said when storms were coming. "Hold tight. Mabel, don't let go of what's yours." I held those words close, not knowing yet how much I would need them, because the next envelope that arrived wasn't just news. It was betrayal, written in ink. When I finally saw him again, 3 weeks had passed since I found the papers. I had replayed that moment 100 times in my head, wondering what I would say when I stood before him. But when the day came, words felt small compared to the weight sitting in my chest. He came in the late afternoon, unannounced, his car tires crunching over the gravel like an echo of guilt. I was sitting by the window sewing one of Samuel's old shirts just to keep my hands busy. The moment I saw his shadow through the curtain, my breath caught. I wanted to run to the door. Part of me still hoped there was an explanation, something that made sense. When I opened it, the light hit his face, and I saw it. That tired look people wear when they've already chosen their side. He didn't hug me. He just said, "Mom, can we talk?" Behind him, his wife lingered on the porch, her perfume thick in the air again, her eyes scanning my home like a real estate agent. She didn't come in at first, just waited, phone in hand, like someone guarding a secret. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one Samuel built decades ago. I remember how many prayers that table had heard. Blessings before meals, tears after funerals, laughter during birthdays. That day, it felt like a witness to a crime. I slid the envelope across the table. "You sold it," I said quietly. "You sold the only thing your father and I ever built together." He didn't look at me right away, just rubbed the back of his neck like a boy caught in a lie. "Mom, please, it's not like that," he said. "Then tell me what it's like." He hesitated, then sighed. "We were struggling, okay? The bills, the mortgage on our new place. Things got out of hand. I thought maybe if I took care of this now, you could move somewhere smaller." "Without telling me?" I interrupted. My voice didn't rise, but it carried every ache that had lived inside me for months. "You took my name off those papers like it was nothing. Like I was just a signature, not your mother." His wife stepped inside then, heels clicking on the floor. "Mrs. Carter, it was my idea," she said, as if that made it better. "You shouldn't be living here alone." It's too much for you. We thought it'd be easier if—" I turned to her slowly. "Easier for who?" The silence that followed was heavy enough to make the clock stop ticking. My son looked between us, lost, cornered, ashamed, but not enough to undo what he'd done. I wanted to yell, to cry, to ask him why he'd trade blood for bricks. But something inside me, maybe age, maybe wisdom, told me that no noise would make him hear me. So I did what his father once did whenever anger filled a room. I went still. He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, it's done. The papers are signed. But don't worry. We'll help you find another place." I laughed then. A quiet, broken laugh that didn't sound like mine. "Another place," I repeated, tasting the words like ashes. "Do you think I can build another 42 years, son? Do you think love grows like weeds in a garden?" His eyes darted away, and for a moment I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who brought me dandelions and said they were flowers. That memory almost softened me. Almost. But then his wife spoke again. "You'll see, Mrs. Carter. Change can be good." I turned my gaze to her. "Some things, child, were never yours to change." The air felt colder then, as if the house itself was listening. My son stood up abruptly. "Let's go," he said to her, voice tight. He looked at me once more, but this time there was no warmth left in his eyes, just guilt and fear. As they walked out, I followed them to the door. "You didn't just sell wood and brick," I said softly. "You sold your father's promise." He paused on the porch, shoulders tense. For a moment I thought he might turn around, but he didn't. The car engine started, and the sound faded down the road until there was nothing but the wind and my heartbeat. I closed the door gently, afraid the house might crumble if I shut it too hard. I leaned against it, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor, the envelope still on the table, mocking me. The sun had set, and shadows filled the room. I whispered, "Lord, don't let bitterness take root." But even as I prayed, I felt something shift in the air, like the walls were breathing heavier, holding back tears I couldn't cry. And somewhere deep inside, a new kind of silence began. Not the quiet of peace, but the kind that comes before a storm. The next few days felt like walking through a dream I didn't belong in anymore. Everything familiar had turned foreign. My son stopped answering my calls, and his wife sent short, polite messages about arrangements and timelines, words that made me feel like a burden being scheduled for removal. I tried to stay strong. I told myself this was just another storm, but even storms need shelter, and mine was slipping away. I started packing my things, though I didn't know where I'd go. Every drawer I opened felt like a wound I was reopening. Samuel's old handkerchief, the church fan with my name on it, photographs of birthdays and Christmas mornings that now felt like lies. I packed slowly, not because I had too much, but because each item carried a piece of my life. There was the chipped teacup Samuel had fixed with glue after I dropped it. "You see, Mabel," he'd said, "things can still hold if you fix them with love." I held that cup so tightly that night, my knuckles ached. The movers were scheduled to come the following week, but I couldn't wait for strangers to touch my memories, so I began stacking boxes in the living room, the same room where my husband had knelt to propose 48 years ago. Now, cardboard walls surrounded me where laughter once lived. By dusk, I was exhausted. I sat on the floor between the boxes, my back against the wall, the hum of the old refrigerator filling the silence. I thought about how strange it was. A woman can raise a child, love him past her limits, and still end up alone with her life packed away in boxes that smell like dust and heartbreak. I wanted to pray, but the words wouldn't come, so I whispered the only thing I could manage. "Lord, if you're still in this house, don't leave me tonight." The air grew still, the kind of stillness that feels like listening. I felt it, that quiet presence I hadn't sensed since Samuel's passing. Maybe it was my imagination, but I swear, for a moment, I smelled his cologne again, cedar and soap. I turned toward the window. The moonlight spilled across the room, landing on the empty rocking chair by the corner, the one that used to creak under Samuel's weight every evening as he read his Bible aloud. "A house without love," he'd say, "is just a roof waiting to cave in." Tears blurred my eyes as I whispered back, "It's caving in now, Sam." I lay down among the boxes, using an old quilt for a pillow, the one my mother made from scraps of her dresses, passed down like a blessing. As I closed my eyes, the night wrapped around me heavy and strange. I listened to every sound, the ticking clock, the faint rustle of the curtains, the groaning wood. Then something happened. So subtle I almost missed it. The lamp by the window flickered. Once, twice, and then turned on, though I hadn't touched it. The light was soft, golden, almost gentle. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding. "Samuel," I whispered. My voice shook, half afraid, half hopeful. Nothing answered, just the faint whistle of wind through the cracks. I tried to brush it off, but the light stayed on. I could feel warmth on my face, the same warmth I used to feel when he'd place his hand on my cheek and say, "You're stronger than you think, Mabel." I closed my eyes, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. When I woke, the lamp was off. Morning light poured in through the curtains, painting everything soft and gold. For a brief second, I forgot what had happened, until I saw the boxes stacked around me, silent witnesses to the life I was leaving behind. But something felt different, lighter, like the house was breathing again. I walked into the kitchen to make tea, and there, on the table, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A single rose, fresh, red, lying right beside the envelope with the house papers. I froze. I hadn't brought any roses inside. The last time I'd tended to the garden, every flower had been dying. I picked it up slowly, trembling. The scent hit me, familiar, calming, almost sacred. "Lord," I whispered, "if this is you reminding me I'm not alone, I hear you." I pressed that rose between the pages of my Bible. That night I didn't pack another box. I just sat in the quiet, holding my tea, waiting for whatever came next, because somewhere deep in my soul, I could feel it. This story wasn't over. The house had something left to tell me. The night after I found that rose, sleep didn't come easy. I tossed beneath the quilt, listening to the groans of the house, old wood shifting, windows sighing, pipes humming like distant voices, the kind of sounds you only notice when you're alone long enough to hear your own thoughts echo back at you. I kept thinking about that rose. How fresh it looked. How alive. There wasn't a vase in sight, no water on the table, and yet the petals hadn't wilted even by morning. I told myself it must have fallen from the bouquet I'd brought weeks ago. But my heart whispered something else, something I didn't have the courage to say out loud. That evening I lit a candle beside my husband's picture, the one taken on our 40th anniversary. His eyes had that same kindness they always carried, even when the world wasn't kind to us. I remember saying quietly, "If you're still watching over me, Sam, I need a sign. Just one." The candle flickered once, then twice. I smiled, brushing away tears. You always did have perfect timing. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with my Bible open, though I wasn't reading. My eyes wandered to the old wooden keyring lying on the mantel. I picked it up again, running my thumb over the initials S, C engraved on the brass tag. The metal was cold, but the longer I held it, the warmer it felt. Almost pulsing, as if it remembered being held before. The clock struck midnight. The sound echoed through the house like a heartbeat. Then, something happened. I heard a voice, faint, low, but unmistakable. It wasn't from outside. It came from within the walls, or maybe within me. Just 5 words, carried by the hum of silence. "The deed isn't what it seems." I froze. My hands trembled so hard I nearly dropped the keys. "Samuel," I whispered, barely breathing. No answer, just the wind outside, howling softly through the old windows. But I knew that voice. I'd know it anywhere. The next morning I couldn't stop thinking about those words. The deed isn't what it seems. What did it mean? I searched the house, checking drawers, boxes, papers, anything that might explain. I pulled down the dusty box labeled Documents, filled with old insurance forms and yellowed receipts. Nothing. Then I remembered the attic. I hadn't been up there since the day we buried Samuel. It was his space, full of tools, blueprints, and things he never wanted me to bother with. The ladder creaked under my weight as I climbed. Dust floated in the air like ghosts dancing in sunlight. In the far corner, under a top, I found Samuel's old workbench, the one he used to fix locks and carve furniture. On top of it sat a metal box I didn't recognize, locked tight. The keyring was still in my hand. I tried one of the smaller keys. It didn't fit. Then another. Click. The lid opened. Inside was a folded letter, yellowed with time, and a second document wrapped in a cloth. My knees went weak as I sat on the floor to read. The letter was addressed to me. Mabel, if you're reading this, it means I've gone to the Lord before you. I know how much this house means to you. That's why I made sure it would always be yours. The real deed, the one with your name, is hidden right here. I never trusted the first bank we worked with, so I made a copy, signed and witnessed. Keep this safe, and if anyone ever tries to take it from you, remember what I always told you. The Lord fights for those who stand still. My tears fell onto the paper, blurring his handwriting. I pressed the letter against my heart, whispering, "You always kept your promises, Sam." Beneath the letter was a second envelope, the real deed. My name bold and clear, right there beside his. The ink had faded, but not enough to erase the truth. I held it to my chest, trembling between laughter and sobs. That night I sat by the candle again, the letter open on the table. "You told me you'd never leave me," I said softly. "And you didn't." The flame flickered higher, and for a moment I swear I saw a shadow move across the wall. Tall, familiar, comforting. It didn't scare me. It felt like home. I whispered into the stillness, "Thank you, Samuel." Outside the roses rustled, even though the wind had died. And in that moment I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of his promise. I didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter in one hand and the real deed in the other, my tears drying into salt on my cheeks. It was as if Samuel himself had reached down from heaven and placed that truth in my lap. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stronger than heartbreak. Purpose. At dawn, I brewed coffee, Samuel's way. 2 spoons of sugar, 1 of faith. I opened the window and let the morning in. The roses outside looked alive again, the petals trembling in the breeze as if they knew something had shifted. I smiled. He always said you'd bloom when it mattered most. I laid the documents neatly on the table, then pressed my hand over them and prayed. "Lord, you saw the injustice. You sent me a sign. Show me what to do next." And just like that, peace washed over me, the kind that doesn't make sense but fills every corner of your chest. I dressed carefully that morning, putting on Samuel's old watch and my Sunday hat, as if preparing for church. But I wasn't going to church. I was going to make things right. The lawyer's office was 2 bus rides away, downtown, a place I hadn't been in years. The young man at the front desk looked surprised when I walked in, my folder clutched to my chest like a shield. "I need to speak to someone about a deed," I said. He offered a polite smile, like I was a lost grandmother asking for directions. But when I laid the papers on his desk, that smile faded fast. He called in his supervisor. Then another man joined them. They whispered to each other, flipping pages, comparing signatures. Finally, the older one, Mr. Thompson, his nameplate said, looked up at me with wide eyes. "Mrs. Carter," he said carefully, "this document overrides the other. Your husband's notarization predates your son's transfer. Legally, this property is still yours." I didn't cry. I just closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Lord." He continued, "Do you want us to proceed with a reinstatement of title?" I smiled faintly. "No rush. Let's keep it quiet for now. Some lessons are best learned slow." On the way home, the sun was brighter than it had been in weeks. I rode the bus with the deed tucked safely in my purse, feeling like I was holding more than paper. I was holding my husband's love, my faith rewarded, my dignity returned. When I stepped back into the house, it didn't feel empty anymore. I lit a candle by Samuel's photo and said softly, "You played your last card for me, didn't you, Sam?" The flame flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. I walked through every room, touching the walls, the furniture, the memory. For the first time since that awful phone call, I didn't feel like a stranger in my own home. But even as peace settled over me, a quiet strength rose too. My son still thought he'd won. He thought his betrayal had gone unseen. I decided then I wouldn't confront him with anger. I'd let the truth reveal itself in time, the same way the Lord reveals his justice. That evening, as I watered the roses, I heard a car stop outside. His car. My heart didn't race this time. I just kept watering. He stepped out, avoiding my eyes, holding some papers. "Mom," he started. "The buyers are coming this week. We'll need to clear everything out by Friday." I turned the hose off slowly and faced him. The sun was low, gold light catching his face. The same face I once kissed goodnight, now hardened by greed. "I see," I said quietly. "Well, let them come." He blinked. "You're not angry?" "Anger doesn't build anything, son, but truth does." He looked confused, uneasy. "What do you mean?" I smiled, that soft, knowing smile only age can carry. "You'll understand soon enough." He frowned, muttered something, and walked back to the car. His wife was waiting inside, tapping her nails on the window, impatience written all over her face. As they drove off, I watched the dust rise behind their tires and whispered to the wind, "You see, Lord, I don't need revenge, just revelation." The sky turned pink and orange, and for the first time in a long while, I laughed, not out of joy, but out of relief, because I finally understood Samuel's last words to me before he died. "When you've done all you can, Mabel, stand still and let God play the final move." And I realized I had the last card. I just needed to wait for the right moment to show it. The morning the buyers were supposed to come, the house smelled like coffee and old prayers. I woke before sunrise, like I always did when Samuel was alive. I brewed a small pot and sat at the kitchen table with the deed in front of me. The paper looked fragile, but I knew it carried something stronger than any signature. Truth. I thought about calling my son first, but something inside me said no. I wanted him to see the truth with his own eyes, not hear it through a trembling phone line. Sometimes lessons need silence to echo. At 9 sharp, I called Mr. Thompson, the lawyer. "I'd like you to be here when they arrive," I said. "I have something to show my son." He hesitated for a moment. "Mrs. Carter, are you sure you want to confront him in person?" I smiled. "Confront? No, sir. I just want to tell the truth, in my own home." By noon, the sun was high, spilling through the windows like grace itself. I dusted the furniture, straightened the pictures, and even baked a peach pie, not because they deserved it, but because peace tastes better when it's served warm. At 1 o'clock, I saw their car pull into the driveway. My son, his wife, and 2 men in suits, the supposed buyers. They looked confident, almost smug, the way people do when they believe they've won. My son didn't even knock. He just walked in saying, "Mom, we're just going to go over a few things. The buyers have the final paperwork." I looked up from the table, my hands calm around my teacup. "I see," I said softly. "Then we should have everyone here, shouldn't we?" That's when Mr. Thompson stepped in from the porch, briefcase in hand. The air shifted. My son froze, confusion flickering across his face. "Who's this?" "My attorney," I said gently. "He's here to make sure everything is correct." His wife's smile faltered. "Correct?" I motioned for Mr. Thompson to sit. "Go ahead," I said. "Show them." He opened the briefcase and placed 2 sets of papers on the table. "This," he said, tapping the first one, "is the recent transfer filed by your son. And this," he placed the second one beside it, "is the original deed, signed and notarized by your late father, giving full ownership to Mrs. Carter." My son's face drained of color. His wife leaned forward, eyes wide. "That's not possible," she said. "We have the documents." "You had copies," Mr. Thompson interrupted. "This one was filed first, years earlier. Legally, your sale is invalid." The silence that followed was thick and sacred. You could almost hear the heartbeat of the house beneath it. My son's lips parted, but no sound came. I watched his throat move. His pride caught somewhere between disbelief and shame. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" he whispered finally. I set my cup down gently. "Because, son, some truths are better seen than told." His wife stood up suddenly, anger replacing her shock. "This isn't fair. We tried to help you." I turned to her, my voice calm but firm. "Help me? You sold what you didn't build. You took what you didn't love? That's not help, dear. That's hunger." She opened her mouth again, but my son put a hand on her arm. For the first time in years, his eyes met mine without arrogance, without excuses, just quiet regret. "Mom," he said, his voice shaking, I don't know what to say." I sighed, feeling the weight lift from my chest. "Then don't say anything. Just listen. This house isn't just mine on paper. It's the place that held your first breath, your father's last, and every prayer in between. You can sell land, son, but you can't sell love. Tears welled in his eyes, and for a moment, the little boy I raised flickered back into view, the one who used to bring me wildflowers and call me his Queen of the Porch. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "I'll handle the legal side, Mrs. Carter," he said. "You're fully protected now." I nodded, eyes still on my son. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. That'll be all." As the men gathered their papers, I turned to my son one last time. "Go home, child," I said softly. "Find your peace before it's sold too." He nodded silently, leading his wife out the door. When the car pulled away, I stood in the quiet doorway and exhaled, slow and deep. The wind outside carried the faint scent of roses. I looked up to the sky and whispered, "You see, Lord?" I didn't raise my hand. I just stood still. "And you fought for me." A single ray of sunlight broke through the clouds and landed on Samuel's photograph by the mantel. His smile seemed brighter somehow, and in that light I finally understood. This wasn't revenge. This was redemption. A week passed after that meeting. The air in the house felt lighter, like a weight had finally lifted off its beams. I walked through each room humming old hymns, polishing the table Samuel built, folding the same quilts I once packed away in boxes. Peace has a sound, you know. It's the sound of quiet mornings, of teacups clinking and clocks ticking in rhythm with your heartbeat. For the first time in a long while, I slept without fear. I didn't dream of papers or lawyers or signatures. I dreamed of roses, blooming wild, their roots deep and untouchable. Then one gray morning I heard it. A knock at the door. Soft at first, then heavier. I opened it, and there they stood. My son and his wife. Only this time they didn't look like victors. Their clothes were wrinkled, their eyes red, their pride gone. He couldn't even meet my gaze. "Mom," he said, voice cracking. "We lost everything." I said nothing, just stepped aside so they could come in. The house welcomed them the same way it once did when he was small, quiet but forgiving. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once slid that envelope toward him. But now, it was him who placed something on the wood, a crumpled eviction notice. The buyers, "They're suing us. They want damages for the sale. The bank froze our accounts." I took a deep breath. The woman beside him, the same one who called my house vintage, had tears running down her cheeks. "Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know. I thought—" I raised a hand gently. "Child, there's no need for excuses. You can't plant lies and expect truth to grow." She lowered her head, shoulders shaking. My son stared at his hands. "I don't know where else to go," he said. "We have nowhere." The ache in my chest returned. Not the pain of betrayal this time, but the old ache that comes from being a mother. You can love your child and still see his faults. You can forgive him and still remember what it cost you. I poured 3 cups of tea. "Drink," I said softly. "Tea doesn't fix everything, but it warms what's left." He looked up, eyes glassy. "After everything I did, why are you helping me?" I smiled, faint and tired. "Because the Lord didn't let bitterness take root, and because this house doesn't belong to revenge, it belongs to mercy." We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the ticking clock. Finally he said, "Mom, can we stay here for a few days?" I nodded slowly. "You can stay until you find your path again. But hear me, son. A roof is just wood and nails. Don't lose your soul trying to build another one without love." He nodded, his eyes filling again. "I don't deserve your kindness." "No," I said, "but neither did I deserve God's." That evening I watched him fix the railing on the porch, the same one Samuel had mended years ago. His wife helped me cook dinner. We didn't speak much, but the silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was healing. As the sun set, the house glowed gold again. I stood by the window watching my son kneel in the garden, trimming the roses I once thought had died. The sight brought tears to my eyes. Samuel's words echoed in my heart. Storms don't destroy what's rooted deep. And there it was, proof the storm had passed. And though it had shaken everything, the roots had held. That night, after they'd gone to sleep in the guest room, I sat at the kitchen table once more. The deed lay in front of me, and beside it, Samuel's letter. I traced his handwriting with my fingers, whispering, "You were right, Sam. The Lord fights for those who stand still." Such rain began to fall, soft, steady, cleansing. I closed my eyes and listened, smiling. Sometimes justice doesn't shout. Sometimes it knocks softly, asking for forgiveness before it enters. and as I blew out the candle beside his photo, I whispered, "We're home, my love, all of us." But deep inside, I knew this story still had one more chapter, because peace isn't the end. It's what prepares you to understand why the storm came at all. It's been 6 months since that stormy season of my life. The house stands quiet again, not empty, not lonely, just peaceful. The roses outside bloom brighter than ever, like they've forgiven the rain for every petal it once took. My son comes by every Sunday now. He knocks before entering, brings his own coffee, and sits on the porch without saying much. Sometimes silence is the only apology the heart needs. His wife helps me in the kitchen, her laughter soft and real this time. She calls me Mama Ruth now, the way neighbors used to, and when she says it, it doesn't sound forced. I never told them about the night I heard Samuel's voice. Some things belong to the soul alone, but every evening when I light the candle beside his picture, I still whisper, "We made it, Sam." And somehow, the flame always steadies, like he's nodding from somewhere unseen. The house itself feels different too, lighter. The cracks in the wall no longer look like wounds. They look like lines of a face that's lived, smiled, and survived. I used to think this place held me prisoner to my past, but now I see it was carrying me to my peace. One afternoon, I sat on the porch with my Bible and the rose I pressed between its pages months ago. When I opened it, the petals had dried perfectly, still red, still fragrant. I smiled, whispering, "Even after death, beauty stays." A neighbor passing by waved and said, "You look happy today, Mrs. Carter." And I answered, "Happiness is when your soul remembers who built your home." Sometimes I think about that night. The voice, the key, the letter. It all feels like a dream wrapped in faith. Maybe it was Samuel. Maybe it was the Lord reminding me that love doesn't die with the body. It just changes form. It turns into light, into guidance, into the quiet that follows forgiveness. One evening, my son asked if I ever regretted forgiving him. I looked at him for a long time before answering. "No," I said. "Regret is what happens when you close the door on grace, and I'm too old to live without grace." He nodded, tears shining in his eyes. "You're stronger than I'll ever be." I smiled. "No, son, I just had a better teacher." That night, after he left, I walked through the house slowly, touching the walls one last time before bed. In the living room, I paused, running my fingers over the wooden table Samuel built, the one that heard all our prayers, our laughter, our heartbreak. The candle beside his photo flickered again, and I could almost hear him whisper, "You see, Mabel, the house never left you. It just waited for you to come home again." I sat down in my chair by the window, the same spot where this story began, and looked out at the roses glowing under the moonlight. Some were fresh, some wilting, all beautiful in their own time. I thought about how life is just like that. Seasons of bloom, seasons of loss, and the mercy that binds them together. Before closing my eyes, I said a quiet prayer. "Lord, thank you for the storms that didn't destroy me. Thank you for the roots that held when the wind tried to take it all. And thank you for love, the kind that builds homes not of brick, but of grace." Then I smiled and whispered to whoever might be listening, "Samuel, the Lord," or maybe the hearts of those who'd understand my story. If you've ever been betrayed, but chose peace instead of anger, know this, your faith is the roof the storm can't touch. So, my dears, if this story touched something in you, if you've ever lost everything only to find yourself again, please, like this video, subscribe to Whispers of Mama Ruth, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because every time you share your story, you keep the light burning in another woman's window. And maybe, just maybe, that's how we all find our way home.